In an industry stuffed with marketing bullshit, empty promises, and shiny-suited liars, one woman's had enough. She knows what it's like to have the wrong clients, no money, and no time for fun. But she also knows how to fix it. And on the Business for Superheroes show, she promises to tell the down and dirty truth about business, sales, and running away with the circus. Here's your host, Vicky Fraser.
Hello and welcome to the Business for Superheroes show. I'm Vicky Fraser and this is Joe.
Hello.
How are you, Joe?
I'm pretty good, thank you. I'm pretty good. I've had a glass of wine and I've had a nice weekend, so I'm good.
Good. Good stuff. We've been to London this weekend and it's been really cool. If you're ever after a place to stay in London, that's lovely. Go to the Rookery in Camberwell because it's fab.
Farringdon.
No, Farringdon Station, but the area is... Oh no, it's Clerkenwell.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought it was Farringdon.
Well, Farringdon, Clerkenwell. Anyway, it's Farringdon Tube Station.
Get off the train at Farringdon and it's a 2-minute walk.
Yeah, basically. It's a lovely hotel. It was built in 1764.
Yes.
And it's got a house cat called Lady Grey. And we stayed in the room Joseph Parcroft, and it's just lovely, isn't it?
It was beautiful. Really nice place. Highly recommend.
Yeah, cool. Right, we're talking about story selling this week.
Storytelling.
Story selling.
Story selling.
Story selling.
Story selling.
Yes, because the secret of selling is what it has always been, which is a damn good story.
A damn good story.
Damn good story. So, yeah, we're gonna talk about why stories are so powerful and why you should be using them in all of your marketing. And I'm gonna start by telling you what I started reading before I even went to school, and it was Enid Blyton. So I don't know if anybody out there has read Enid Blyton. Have you read Enid Blyton, Joe?
I've not read much Enid Blyton, but I do remember having like a secret spy book thing that was based on Enid Blyton that had all kinds of code wheels and things in it.
Oh, I think I had one of those. Was it like the Secret 7 or something?
It had bits of film in it with holes in it, and you put it on certain pages and it spelled out words and things.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I didn't read an awful lot of the actual books.
You had a seriously deprived childhood. Because,
deprived. It was tragic.
Dear listeners, this Christmas, Father Christmas brought Joe a copy of The Wind in the Willows because I found out that he'd never read it.
Father Christmas found out.
Father Christmas found out that...
Maybe edit that out.
That Joe had never read The Wind in the Willows, if you can believe that. I was shocked.
It's true. It's true.
I have obviously read The Wind in the Willows and it was marvellous. Broom, broom.
At what age was it marvellous?
It was marvellous from the age of about 5 to about 15 or so. You need to read it. It's a fabulous story. Anyway, alongside The Wind in the Willows, I also read The Enchanted Wood and The Magic Faraway Tree, which were awesome books, and The Famous Five. So you must know The Famous Five, right?
Yeah, sure.
Lashings of Ginger Ale.
Lashings of Ginger Ale. And there was, like, Swallows and Amazons, that was one.
Okay, yeah.
Did that one.
Okay.
Lots of messing around on boats.
Yes. And, I don't know, like Treasure Island and...
Treasure Island, yeah.
That was a cool book.
That was a cool book. Lord of the Flies.
Yes, Lord of the Flies was excellent.
Not so much of a children's story book, but
no, it's more of a teenager's book. But yeah. But the point is that you remember this stuff, because I can still remember details from a lot of the stories from the Enid Blyton books I read. And, for example, in one of the Famous Five books, I remember somebody's uncle, and I think it might have been George's uncle, and they were in a lightning storm, basically. I think they were in a storm near a lighthouse, and they were solving some mystery to do with smugglers in Cornwall, which they often did.
It's very sensible.
Very sensible. But they were in a storm, and lightning struck like a few feet away from them. And I remember George's uncle saying that if they hadn't all been wearing rubber-soled shoes, he reckons they would all be dead right now. And so that has always stuck with me, and I think that is the source of my my mortal fear of electricity.
I'm chuckling now because Vicky phoned me up a couple of weeks ago, and I was at work, surrounded by engineers, and Vicky reported something had gone bang behind the TV, which wasn't on, because she was at work. That's what she does during the day, not watch TV. Yeah, you were asking me what to do, and I just said, well, turn it off and I'll sort it out when I get home. And this room full of engineers heard me say the immortal words, you can stand on a book if you really want to. It probably won't help, but if it makes you feel better.
The thing is, though, I remember the story about the rubber-soled shoes. And I wondered if maybe washing up gloves would help as well. Not that I have any washing up gloves, because I don't really do the washing up. But the point is that all of these many years later,
you're still traumatized by the idea of having to go near something electrical.
Yeah, but no, but I don't touch batteries or anything, do I? It's pathetic.
It's quite funny.
Anyway, the thing is though, I seem to attract an awful lot of static electricity, and it really hurts. I remember my hand hurt for like a couple of hours once when I got a static shock off something or other.
I had the biggest static shock at work several years ago.
Really?
Absolutely ginormous. It was huge. We used to move large aluminium plates around, and they were separated by sheets of plastic. And anybody who's designed capacitors knows that large sheets of metal separated by thin sheets of plastic trundled around on trailers with nylon wheels. It's a recipe for disaster. And I was a junior engineer with a metal
is that not really dangerous?
Measuring stick. And I was measuring the flatness of these things as they came off the trailer.
Right.
And I touched one of them. And it blew me across the corridor. It was horrible.
I mean, you're kind of laughing now, but isn't that really dangerous?
Yeah, I reckon if I was old or pacemaker-y, yeah, if at the very least I could have banged my head on something as I came down, because I did. I went across a roadway. But
isn't that why old windmills are designed? Old windmills were always wooden. All the moving parts were wooden, weren't they?
Nothing sparky.
And nothing sparky at all, because flour is extremely flammable, isn't it? It's very explosive.
And you get special tools for dealing with vehicle electrics.
Yeah.
So that you don't create sparks on things.
Yeah. One day, listeners, I'll tell you the story of my shonky old motorbike. That day is not today though, because
not today. We're supposed to. We have a plan. We're going to talk about story selling.
Yeah, well, it's stories about static electricity there, which were, led on from Enid Blyton and my memories of rubber-soled shoes, and now I can't ever touch anything electrical.
To be honest, I think if you're going to get struck by lightning, I'm not convinced a pair of rubber shoes are going to help.
No, the lightning struck a little distance away. Mm. And he was saying that because lightning travels through the ground, doesn't it?
Did you know cows are much more vulnerable to lightning strikes than people? Not because...
Well, there's more of them and they're outside, aren't they?
Not because they're just outside in the rain on a hill, but because their feet are so far apart. So...
Really?
Yeah. It's because there's a voltage drop. If you imagine there's like the lightning strike in the centre of your bullseye.
Yeah.
And then a few feet away, the ground is at a certain voltage, and a few feet further away, the ground is at a lower voltage. So because you as a human have feet that are relatively close together, there's only a small voltage drop between your feet. Oh. Whereas a cow could have like feet 6 foot apart, and there's a much bigger voltage drop, so the cow gets a bigger shock.
Wow. There you go, listeners. If you're ever caught in a lightning storm, make sure you've got your feet really close together.
And you're not a cow.
And lie on the floor, and apparently you're supposed to dig your fingers into the floor and stick your elbows in the air.
Make your elbows the highest point, yeah.
Because you don't want the current to go through the centre mass of your body, basically.
Or your head.
Be bad.
Through your elbows into the ground. Good plan.
So that's your first lesson for this podcast is, don't get struck by lightning, and if you do, make sure it's your elbows.
Yeah. Cows don't have elbows, that's their problem.
Yes, that is their problem.
Particularly vulnerable to lightning strikes.
Yeah.
Anywho,
back to Enid Blyton. The other thing I remember about Enid Blyton is Silky and Moonface from the Enchanted Wood. And because of that, I still look for little windows and doors in trees.
Okay.
Yeah, I know there are no fairies and things like that, but part of my brain really wants to believe in them. So I can't help looking for little windows and doors. And there was a whole thing in certain woods. There's been this movement where people have put tiny little doors in nooks and crannies in woods. Google it. Google fairy doors. It's awesome.
Fairy doors?
Fairy doors, yeah. People have made tiny little doors and tiny little gardens, and it's quite cool. Anyway, Joe's giving me a funny look now. But yeah, storytelling. I mean, if you want people to remember stuff, tell them a story. Just look at the Bible. The stories that have endured for hundreds and thousands of years. A few thousand years from the Bible, and that the Bible is part of our rich history and our rich mythology, just the same as the Celtic legends and Aesop's fables and the Brothers Grimm and Beowulf and the old English stories as well. And we remember those, and they're all passed down orally. Mm-hmm. In the old days, because people couldn't write, and that's how people remembered stuff. And things like Beowulf and the Brothers Grimm and Aesop's fables weren't just for entertainment way back then, and nor was the Bible. It was all down to controlling people. So the way people passed on information, that important stuff that they wanted to remember, was through storytelling. Because if you tell somebody a story about
Boy Who Cried Wolf,
the Boy Who Cried Wolf, there's a lesson in there.
It's educational.
Yeah, and you guys are probably going to remember the story of Joe being knocked across the room by static electricity and the cows with their feet further apart. And, that kind of thing is all by way of saying, beware of this stuff. It's much more memorable to tell somebody a vivid story about something dangerous than to just say, don't touch that knob over there, or, don't stick your hand in the fire, because that's really boring. So yes, there you go. Oh, another book that's always stuck with me, by the way, and I don't know if you've read this, Joe, and readers, everyone should read this, and I reckon it should be required reading in schools. It's called Black Like Me.
No, haven't read that.
Oh, I've got it. You need to read it. It's amazing. It's the story. Well, it was a white journalist called John Howard Griffith, and he lived as a black man for 6 weeks in the 1950s in America's Deep South, which must have been quite an experience. Well, it was quite an experience because I've read his book, but his diary became his book, and it has changed. I think it has changed quite a lot of people's lives because, you can have people saying, oh, racism exists and it's awful and blah, blah, blah. But if you don't live it, you don't notice it. And, I had this hammered home to me when I was talking to my friend Yinka a few weeks ago, and she was telling me just the little everyday stuff that happens to her. Because she's a 6 foot tall, beautiful, amazing black woman. And just the little things that happen to her every day that the white people don't notice because it doesn't happen to them. It's like women get talked over in meetings and men don't notice because it doesn't happen to them, so they won't accept that sexism still exists. Anyway, read Black Like Me. It's a fantastic book.
And hello, Yinka, if you're listening. Thanks for the lift home the other night.
Yeah. So at the moment, I'm totally obsessed with Stephen King, and because he's a master storyteller. Joe, what are you reading at the moment?
I'm reading the second book in the trilogy, Wool.
Oh, and what do you think?
It's pretty good. It's good stuff. Good stuff, yeah. Enjoying it.
Yeah, it is.
I think the first book was better. I get the impression the publishers lent on him to get the second book out.
I think that actually happened, yeah.
So it's a bit kind of, it's a bit quicker. It's moving along a bit faster and it's a bit less thoughtful. Yeah. But yeah, it's overall good.
Yeah. But why, okay, let me ask you this. Why did you enjoy Wool? What was it about the book, the story, that captured you?
Different world, interesting timelines, the stories of people in strange places with difficult things to deal with. It's the people stuff, I guess. Yeah,
pretty much. You can... And Joe's just nailed it there, because you can tell stories about things and you can tell stories about, this happened and that happened. But the reason we're interested... Like, take The Walking Dead. We're fairly obsessed with The Walking Dead, aren't we?
Vicky is fairly obsessed with The Walking Dead.
You like it too.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
But the point is, it's a show about zombies and it's on to its 6th season now. And there's only so much stabbing zombies in the head that you can really show before it gets a bit dull, because there's only so many ways that you can, decapitate a zombie.
Many ways to decapitate a zombie.
Yeah, but you kind of reach the limit of that after a couple of episodes, because it's all about, mashing zombie brains.
But it's not about mashing zombie brains.
But it's not. It's about the group of people that have survived this zombie apocalypse and the challenges that they face. And it's not just zombies, it's the threat from other people, and it's the threat from the situation that they're in, and the fact they've got no electricity and they've got to, relearn how to do stuff. That's the stuff that makes The Walking Dead really interesting. Mm-hmm. And it's the same with any other.
The struggle for survival and all that. The zombies are almost incidental, aren't they? Yeah,
it's all about their relationship as a group, and, it's about the people, their lives and their stories, because we are interested in people. So yeah, and that's what you find interesting about any story that you read or watch or listen to. And anyway, all of this is by the by. The point is that stories are really, really powerful, and they can be very positive, but they can also be, quite negative. If you look at what our media and our government are doing today, it's kind of, they're doing some of the same things that the Nazis did way back in World War I and World War II. They were told stories about the Jews and made up stuff and said, they're in a conspiracy to take over the world, and that's part of how they managed to just commit the atrocities that they committed. And some of those opinions have persisted to today. The stereotypes have persisted to today, which is alarming. But our media is doing the same now with, Muslims as terrorists. Mm-hmm. They're making people afraid of other people, which is...
The Americans are certainly having a good go at that.
That's just Donald Trump. And
Trump is just
dick.
Unbelievable.
Trump is another word for fart, which I love. Anyway, and, they portray poor people as stupid and worthless and lazy, which is obviously not true. And they portray women as being most suited to being mothers and caregivers, just, I would probably eat my own young. Oh, that's a joke, I wouldn't. But, stories form our worldview, and they're very difficult to shift. And they can be used for good or for evil, and they can be incredibly persuasive. And so, Joe, do you know why stories are so powerful?
That's a big question, because it's the oral tradition, because it's the storytelling, because it's I don't know. Tell me why, Vix. Tell me why.
Okay, there's a book called Wired for Story, which is great, and I really recommend you
Who's
read
that by?
it. It's by Lisa Cron.
Okay.
Cron, and she says that story was vital for our evolutionary development. So, opposable thumbs let us hang on to stuff. Story tells us what to hang on to, which I quite like. I like that little quote. Opposable thumbs let us hang on to stuff, and story tells us what to hang on to.
Sloths don't have opposable thumbs.
They have all kinds of opposable digits.
Do they?
I think so.
Are you sure? I don't think they're opposable.
Well, they work quite well.
Anyway, they're rubbish at storytelling.
They are rubbish at storytelling.
They don't know what they're doing.
But the point is that we humans can imagine what might happen in the future, and we can plan for it and prepare for it.
Unlike sloths.
Unlike sloths. Although I reckon that higher apes and elephants, and possibly some of the bigger marine mammals, are storytellers. Especially elephants. Elephants have graveyards.
They do.
So, that kind of sets us apart from other animals, apart from maybe the elephant.
On the animal kingdom storytelling thing, squirrels, right? Everybody thinks squirrels have got a brilliant memory because they bury all the nuts and then they find them all next year. It's not true. What the squirrels have is a rule. They have rules as to where they put their nuts. So they don't remember where they have put nuts. They just know the rule under which they most likely placed the nuts. So rather than remembering this smattering of thousands of locations, what they'll do is they'll go, well, I put a nut 2/3 the distance between a big tree and a smaller tree. And that's where they plant the nut.
Okay.
And then when they're looking for food because they're hungry, they go, well, I'll go 2/3 of the way between a big tree and a small tree, and I'll dig there and I'll find a nut. They don't remember thousands of locations of nuts. They just remember a rule.
So they might be stealing other squirrels' nuts all the
No,
time.
they'll have different rules. Different squirrels have different rules.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, otherwise they wouldn't be able to find their nuts.
I'm going to research that.
It's true.
That sounds really interesting.
Even if it's not, it makes sense.
Well, yeah, but if it's not true, then it doesn't matter how much sense it makes.
It's a good story, though, hey?
It is good. It's a good story, yeah. Cool. So this storytelling stuff, anyway, is not speculation. Neuroscience actually shows that our brains are hardwired to respond to stories. Our brains change when we read or hear a story. And they have done some research Spanish researchers in Spain.
Spanish people.
Yeah. I'm actually not drinking, This is dry January for me.
It's not dry January for me.
Researchers in Spain have found that being told a story drastically changes the way our brains work. And when people hear neutral words like chair or table or car key, the language processing parts of the brain called Broca's and Wernicke's areas are activated exclusively. That's the only areas of the brain that's activated. But when people are being told a story, other sensory areas of the brain are activated as well. So if you were telling a story that was using words associated with odour, smell, like perfume or coffee, then that part of your brain would light up.
Right.
As well as the information part. But if you're just giving people cold facts about car keys and tables and chairs, then only the language processing part of your brain is activated.
And is there an advantage to getting more bits of brain engaged in this?
There is, because we don't make decisions with information and facts and rational stuff. You will tell yourself, and people will tell you, they will insist that they make rational decisions using all of the available information, but they don't. What they do is they post-rationalise their decision with the information. So it's still important to give people facts and statistics, but that's not what will make the decision for them. What makes the decision is their emotional reaction to the story, or is their emotional reaction to the advertising or to the marketing or to whatever.
Okay.
It's true.
Okay.
Joe's looking vaguely sceptical here because he's an engineer and he'll insist that he's entirely rational.
Entirely rational, like a robot.
Like a robot.
No emotion in here.
But it's true, and I shall prove this to you. Well, I won't prove it to you. Antonio Damasio, who is a famous neuroscientist, has done some absolutely fascinating experiments with people who have had brain injuries, traumatic brain injuries, and they've lost the decision-making part, the emotional part of their brain. basically. So they don't experience emotions in the same way that you and I experience emotions. Well, not Joe, because he's a robot. But he basically did experiments with them. Not on them, with them. I hasten to add. And he's found that people who lack an emotional reaction to a situation struggle to make a good decision in that situation, even if they're otherwise quite intelligent. So if they're presented with a series of facts, if they're presented with two decisions where one of them is clearly better than the other, if they are, given all of the available facts, they'll be able to do it. But if they're asked whether they would prefer tea or coffee, they would dither.
Struggle.
They physically wouldn't be able to make the decision because there's no emotional attachment to either the tea or the coffee.
Okay.
Which is really interesting. And, this is explained way better than I just have in his book, which is called The Feeling of What Happens, which is a really good book. It's quite heavy going, but it's worth a read. But there's all kinds of articles about this decision-making and emotional, stuff. And it's an accepted fact now that emotions are the key of decision-making. If you don't evoke an emotional reaction in somebody, then nothing. In fact, Bill Bernbach, who is one of the greatest advertisers of the 20th century, said, you can say all the right things about a product and nothing will happen. Because if they don't feel it, they won't do anything. I've completely butchered that quote, but that's basically what he said.
Okay.
So if you want somebody to buy something or do something or take action on something, you've got to make them feel it. And storytelling is a really good way of making people feel stuff. So here you go. I've got some more proof for you here because I've just told you the kind of interesting but nerdy neuroscience facts. But then there's a researcher named Jennifer Aaker. That's 2 A's at the beginning and a K-E-R.
Okay.
She is a marketing professor at Stanford's Graduate School of Business, and she did an experiment on her, or possibly with her students. And she made each of her students give a 10-minute pitch. So 1 in 10 students used a story within his or her pitch, while the other students stuck to more traditional pitch elements such as facts and figures. Because if you look at most advertising and marketing, it's boring facts and figures. And when people pitch, they're like, fact.
Buy this because.
Yeah. But the professor then asked the class to write down everything they remembered about each pitch. And 5% of students cited a statistic that they'd heard, but a whopping 63% of students remembered the stories that they had been told.
Back to the old oral tradition stuff.
Back to the old oral tradition stuff, because you need to get emotions involved if you want people to remember stuff, if you want people to make decisions, if you want people to do anything, basically.
Okay.
And if you don't want to bore the shit out of people as well. Because most advertising, most marketing bores the pants off people because it's crap. I feel quite strongly about this. It's so easy to stand head and shoulders above your competitors. It really is, because all you have to do is be a real human person and tell stories. Don't make stuff up. Although you can, as long as you make it clear that you've made stuff up. But what I would suggest you do is tell stories about the people who buy your products. What problem did they have? How did your product help them overcome it? Where did they end up because of that? There you go. You've got a story. Bang. Tell it in an engaging way and you're sorted.
Cool.
Yeah. And I'm going to leave you with a couple of suggestions. Watch everything that David Attenborough has ever made if you want to see a master storyteller in action. And I'm going to give you a URL to go to as well, if I can just find it. It's all about hermit crabs. Okay, the URL is www.tinyurl.com/BFS-hermit crab. BFS for Business for Superheroes. So that's www.tinyurl.com/BFS-hermit crab. It's all about hermit crabs, and it's all about how they move house, basically. But it's, I'm going to sit here and tell you that hermit crabs find bigger shells. When they outgrow their old shell, they find a new shell. That's pretty dull. Now go and watch the David Attenborough clip and find out how you get people to remember this stuff, because it's just amazing.
Cool.
And then after you've done that, go and Google They Lived by Subaru. It's a 30-second car advert, and it's a masterclass in telling a story in 30 seconds. It's not the product that's powerful, it's the story that Subaru tells, and it absolutely nails the concerns of its target audience, which is parents who drive their kids around. So go and watch watch everything David Attenborough's ever done.
That might take a while.
Yeah. And then also compare it to George Monbiot, or Monbiot, I don't know how you say his name. But I think he's kind of modelling himself as the next David Attenborough. And whilst he's doing decent things, I mean, he's doing amazing things. He's doing documentaries and all the rest of it. And his subject matter is really interesting. But watch a David Attenborough and then watch a George Monbiot. And see the difference. David Attenborough is a master storyteller. And George Monbiot just doesn't have it. He doesn't have the storytelling. And it's really interesting to watch the two of them and, you know, see what David Attenborough does that Georgie doesn't. Really interesting. So there you go. Storytelling in a nutshell. So let me ask you, people, what are you going to do? Are you going to give people a boring list of features and benefits about your product and service, or are you going to tell stories about them? If you are smart and you want to sell your stuff or change people's minds, you know, this is particularly important for charities and for social enterprises. You've got to make people feel something. You're never going to change the world or even, you know, your life if you don't tell stories. Thanks, Joe.
Cool. You're welcome.
Right. And by the way, if you want to know more about storytelling, my Inner Circle members have access to a tele-class that I did. It's like an online hour-long tele-class about storytelling. Now, I went into a lot more detail than this. So if you want that kind of amazing information, you can go to businessforsuperheroes.com/inner-circle and join us. And other than that, next podcast is same time next week. And we're going to be talking about habits. Habits. A bit more neuroscience. Habits.
Cool.
Yeah. So I'll see you guys there.
Take it easy.
Like what you've just heard? Tell your colleagues, tell your friends, send them to www.businessforsuperheroes.com/podcast.